All right, today my guest is Trent Wilcox, Park Rapids High School graduate from, I'm going to guess, 77?
82.
82?
82.
You know, on your LinkedIn page, you really ought to go and fix that because it says you graduated from college in 82, but then it also says you graduated college from 88.
Really?
Yeah. So which is it, Trent? Were you lying then, or are you going to lie now?
I can't say. I'll plead the fifth. No, 82 was my high school, and then to complete 3 undergraduate majors, it took me till 88 to actually pick those up.
So it did take you a little extra
Yep,
time.
yep.
All right. Business and education and political science.
That's correct, yep.
You spent 6 years at Mankato.
Nope. I spent 2 years at Wartburg College down in Waverly, Iowa.
Again, you need to update your LinkedIn. Otherwise, I'm just, people are going to be left in the dark on that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I probably haven't looked at the page for quite a while. Yeah.
And then a law degree from Arizona State University.
Correct.
And that's in Tempe.
Tempe, yep.
Right. Now, Trent is a friend of mine and a colleague. And Trent is also the 2019 Minnesota State champion. I don't think I said that with enough.
Yep, the senior.
Minnesota State champion amateur golfer, senior division, and an expert in a lot of things. Expert in the area of snowmobiling, and also he dabbles in the law.
Exactly.
So we hope to touch on all those subjects today. Welcome, Trent Wilcox.
All right, thanks for having me.
Trent, did you grow up in Park Rapids?
I did. I was born here in 1964.
Where were you born?
At the old St. Joe's Hospital before they remodeled it.
Where is that located?
That's right down here.
Same place.
Same
it is
place
now?
it is now. Yep. I don't know when it was built, but it was a different building then. They've updated it.
Were your folks from Park Rapids?
My dad was born in Park Rapids in 1919. My mom was born in Bemidji in 1932.
Oh, so he married an exotic woman.
Went a long way out of town. Yep.
And did you spend your entire childhood here?
I did. Yep.
You grew up in town, I believe, right?
Yep. Actually, half a block from where we are now.
What was the population like at that time?
The number I remember on the old sign was 2772 for years.
What was it like growing up as a kid in Park Rapids?
It was true small town in the sense that it was the same old families over and over again until we started getting some of the bigger businesses into town. When the potato plant came in, that brought in out-of-town workers. And that was the first time that you saw some movement in the family names.
When was that?
Oh, let's see. It must have been, it's probably built when I was 6th, 7th grade, I suppose, somewhere in there. So you're talking, probably mid-70s.
Was your family one of those traditional Park Rapids families?
Yep. I don't know how long my family was here. I know my dad was born in 1919 here. But his family would have moved here before that. His dad was the postmaster back in the day. My original family history goes back to New York State, though.
Oh, okay. So, was your grandfather the first person that was in Park Rapids, or does it go back even further than that?
That's correct. Yep. So that
you told me about that one. So they came from New York State.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. And so. Give us an idea of, what was there on Main Street? What was there to do as a kid during the summertime and the 60s and 70s in Park Rapids?
So the old Main Street, those businesses rotate through periodically. I can still remember some of the old ones, Wimpy's Cafe, Al's Paint Glass, places that we normally use, but it's the same old buildings. It was quite a while into it before we started actually moving businesses out of town, really. But Main Street was it. So we had the old Palmyra downtown was just an old building down on the far end there. winter, a lot of those buildings or those businesses closed. Summer, our lives as a kid, I remember basically living at the beach, the city beach, which is right behind us here.
Where Red Bridge Park is now.
That's correct. Yep. So, I get.
Did you ever use that bathhouse that's there?
Oh yeah. Yep. They had a couple ping pong tables in there. You could rent a locker if you needed it. Spent a lot of time there. Tons of time.
On is it the south side of Main Street or some area like that? Isn't that sort of where the local toughs used to meet up on a Friday night for cruising or knife fights and things like that? I think of like Rebel Without a Cause or something.
Yeah, no, it wasn't quite like that, but there was some conflicts. That's where they would kind of center. But each clique had their own block. Oh. So there were the jocks and the druggies, and I think there were 3 blocks that were claimed by various groups.
Yeah.
And then you'd have these kind of these kids who never really left high school that, were in their 20s who were still hanging around. But I kind of think I was the last of the cruiser era, class of 82.
Which block was claimed by the druggies? Were you?
They were on the far end. And then we were typically on the close end here, which would be the north end. That was the jocks. And
so you identified with the jocks.
I identified with the jocks, yes.
And I know that there's like a lot of stories and stuff that went down, and your brothers were kind of tough guys and things like that too, right? And
the troublemakers, yes.
Troublemakers, and always looking for a fair fight, right?
Looking for any fight, I think.
You told me a story about how there was a local boy who had been wronged by another boy somewhere around here in Park Rapids, and he wound up writing a letter to you later, or was it to you or to your mother later, thanking one of your brothers for doing him some sort of justice, right?
Yep. Some local bully was picking on a kid and caught him in the alley.
Which alley now?
It would be this alley right next to our building here.
Okay, and that would be like Minnesota Street and Main Avenue, kind of. That's where we're at now.
Yeah, so that alley that now leads to Simonson's, that alley there, because my house was behind there. Yeah. So a bully had caught this guy, and I think he was taking it to him pretty good. And then my brother comes running out of our backyard, and he would have been younger than both of them, but he had a 2x4. And I guess he stood over the other kid and said, you will not hit him anymore. And so
you will not hit him anymore.
And something like that. And
that's spoken like a true peacemaker.
Exactly. The kid didn't make a move. But years later, I moved back in 2011 after spending 21 years in Arizona. I moved back in 2011, and probably within 3 or 4 years, I was walking over to my mother's house for lunch, and I got pulled over by a guy that I didn't recognize. Mm-hmm. And he asked if I was Trent Wilcox. I said yes. He goes, I want you to have this. And it was this guy with his son handed me this letter. And it was a letter about that incident. Basically,
all those years ago.
Yep.
Isn't it amazing how things like that can stick out from childhood?
Yeah.
You can't remember what you had for breakfast even this morning, but you remember just every detail about some fight that you had or some incident that occurred when you were in the 4th or 5th grade.
Yeah.
But I bet you that was, for that guy, it was probably a good moment for him to be able to deliver that letter to you.
For all I know, he'd been picked on, and this is the first time maybe somebody ever stuck up for him.
So you've been thought of as sort of the Tiger Woods of Park Rapids, and I say that because you told me before that your father had a big influence on your golfing and your kind of getting you interested in the sport and kind of pushing you to be great at it from a young age, just as Earl Woods did for his son Tiger. So can you kind of explain a little bit about how you first got involved in golf and kind of the role that your father had in getting you interested in the sport?
Yep. So he had me start at about age 6. And then once we started, we really started. And every summer we spent, every evening out there. It wasn't raining at the Headwaters Golf Club. And I think to some extent he lived vicariously through me. And I was really his first child. I was the youngest of three, but I was his first child to actually take an interest in his sports. So I played baseball, I played golf, I played a little football younger age, basketball. And so his sporting career was stopped early because he had been playing AAA ball, I believe, if that's what they called it back then, for the Cubs out in California. And in between seasons, he'd come back to work, and he went back to his old job at the butcher shop locally. And then he lost 2 fingers in an accident in the butcher shop.
Oh, no.
On his right hand. And they'd been trying to turn him into a pitcher. He liked to play outfield, but they were trying to turn him into a pitcher because he had such a good arm. And so he lost his index finger and middle finger on his right hand.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So then he went back out there the next season and actually played for him. And they let him go back out to the outfield because he could still throw. I mean, he taught me to throw. You couldn't tell unless you knew.
So that was his throwing hand.
That was his throwing hand. So they still let him throw batting practice, he said.
Because you remember there was a guy, he pitched for the Angels. Abbott was his name.
From Michigan.
Was he from Michigan?
I think the University of Michigan. Yep.
But Abbott only had one hand, but it was his pitching hand. He was missing a hand on his left hand, and I think what he used to do was throw right, and then he would switch the glove to the throwing hand quickly, and he could field his position pretty well.
Yeah, it was very smooth motion,
But I'm just thinking, to lose an index finger and a middle finger, it would be extremely hard to throw without those 2 fingers. Because every time you see one of those classic photos of a pitcher showing, here's how I throw the curveball, here's how I throw the slider, it's always usually involving those 2 fingers, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. So they moved. He could still wing it from the outfield. I mean, like I say, when I would play catch with him, everything looked normal until you got up close and actually saw his hand. Yeah. So he could throw, but then of course World War II started, and they didn't let him in. This is a story too, if you want me to tell.
Yeah, I was curious because I was wondering, did that happen before or after?
Yeah, so that happened before, and then Pearl Harbor happened. Every boy in town, probably by 4 a.m. the next day, was at a recruiter's office.
Where was that located?
The Armory, the old Armory's down here on Park Avenue on 71 here. So I imagine they had offices there, at least the Army recruiter.
Just trying to picture what this looked like. Yeah.
So he said everybody was lined up by 4. The recruiter showed up at 7 a.m. So they'd already been there. And so that was the Army recruiter my dad went to. No, excuse me. He went to the Marine recruiter first. And they wouldn't even, he went in and he looked at his hand and they said, no way. So then he went to the Army recruiter. Army recruiter said, no, we can't take.
Well, how would you squeeze the trigger of a rifle?
Yeah, it never affected him that way. I've never seen him miss a shot of anything with any gun, ever.
Okay, yeah.
And he qualified as expert when he did get in. Yeah. And the way he got in is, so they rejected him twice. So a year later, he gets a draft notice. And he took it for the Army. He took it to the Army recruiter. And he goes, what's this? You guys already rejected me. He goes, if you get a draft notice, that means they're desperate for men. And they let him through. And so then he qualified as an expert.
What was his name?
Russell
Wilcox.
Yeah.
So he qualified. They just ignored the finger issue. Yeah. He got in. And then where was he stationed during the war?
So he spent, I think his base was, I want to say Dothan, Alabama. But he went, when he went to Europe during the war, he went up through the boot of Italy. And they pushed the Nazis out of Italy and went through that way. Of course, there was a multi-front war at that point. Sure. But he went all the way through to Germany, and then he ended up in the occupation force following the war in France for a while.
Was he infantry?
Infantry, yep. Yeah.
So when he returned from the war, obviously you weren't born at that point when the war was going on. No. At least I mean, I know you're old, but not quite. Okay, no. But so getting back to the golf then, so he got you out there at 6.
Yep.
Now, in your expert opinion, is 6 years old too old or too young to start?
You know, for me, I think the younger the better. But I think if you can get a child started at 10 or earlier would be ideal. Just looking back at it, I mean, there are certainly very good golfers who develop later. Mm-hmm. Some don't take it up until their 30s. But if you're going to really be top level championship golfer, able to handle the pressure kind of as second nature, I think the younger the better.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what makes golf, I think, something that is just such a fascinating game, because not only do you have the physical skills that are necessary, and then just sort of the mental skills in terms of, you know, how hard do I hit this ball, at what angle am I going for here? But then when you start playing at a competitive level, now you've got to do all of that, but then with an immense amount of pressure on you to perform, right? I mean, and so and I think that's interesting what you said, that third aspect of it, the pressure. The earlier you start, the easier or maybe the better you're able to cope with that pressure. Why do you think that is?
I think you grow into the pressure. So if you're playing junior tournaments, you know, at 10, 12 years old, you know, by the end of 2-3 seasons, you've put in 20 tournaments already. And I just think you get used to it, you know, and you walk up there, it's a tournament, and you play it just like it's a practice round. You know, I know from my experience, when I play a lot of golf, I just get up there and tee it up and I don't think about it. When I've taken breaks from golf and come back, it's kind of nerve-wracking, that first tee, and it's not as natural.
But it's got to be different though when you're in a big tournament, let's just say, not just you sort of your kind of run-of-the-mill tournament, you know, but you're in, I mean, like the tournament that you won in 2019. Mm-hmm. Where you're looking at this and saying, you know, I actually have a shot to win this thing, but I have to hit not only this shot, but I have to hit the next shot and the next shot, and I have to be perfect, essentially, right, in order to come out on top. So how do you deal with that? I mean, do you kind of just try to say, you know, one shot at a time, or, you know, do you tell yourself, I don't care if I win this tournament, or how do you, what goes through your mind at that time?
Yeah, and these aren't my words, but, you know, one of the tricks of golf is that you got to really focus on every little aspect when you're practicing, and you've got to care a lot about the details, the fine parts of that. And then when you're actually playing, you have to act like you don't care. And I think golf is a little unique there, because to try and golf almost never works. You just have to totally relax. If I'm playing basketball, maybe my shot's off for a night, I can do other things. I can go rebound. I can play tough defense. I can focus on those and try really hard. You take that sort of effort in golf, and it'll backfire on you, I think. Because, you know, part of the thing is, in golf, you're out there in a tournament, you're out there for 5 hours, and you are hitting a shot, and then you're waiting. It could be 10 minutes before you hit the ball again, and you're in a tight tournament. And so all these things are going through your head. You have to tell yourself, I don't care about those things, basically, because if you focus in on them, it'll drive you nuts. And so for me, I just try to coast through it, and just keep an even keel. Good shot, bad shot. I'm not going to be effusive, because I don't want to change my the way I'm thinking about it. I want it to be very level, very, you know, even keeled. I don't want to get excited when I do something good, and I don't want to get upset when I, you know, when I screw up something too. So,
you know, just hearing you explain that makes me think, like, wow, what a good skill that is to have to carry forward in life in general, right? I mean, if, you know, there's times and situations where we all have to, quote unquote, perform, you know, whether it be, you know, in the courtroom as an attorney, or I don't know what the other professions are. I don't really know if you're performing a surgery or something, you know, or any job where there's pressure, right? to be able to deal with it with this attitude of I don't care. And then just to link that up with what you were saying before, like the younger you are when you start doing something like that, the more able you are to develop that. Because
I think so. I think it's like with anything. The earlier you start, I would say this. The danger of playing too much golf too young could be burnout. So there are a lot of young players out there that were spectacular in juniors, and maybe they went out and play college, and then they're done.
They just get tired of it.
It's a grind. The practice. Like I remember when I played college basketball, we had 2-hour just grueling practices, but when you were done, you were done. But golf, when I was playing college golf, I would go out in the mornings in the summers, and I would hit 450 balls a day in the morning, and then I would go practice putting and chipping. That could take me anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. And maybe I'd play 9 holes, maybe I'd play 27 holes, whatever was left. And it was just a long, grueling day, partly because there's so many aspects of golf, and everybody has to do every part of it, which is, I think, different from a lot of other sports. It's hard to focus on one area and neglect another. You have to practice them all.
And what I'm hearing from you is basically there are no shortcuts, right? I mean, you could have somebody who's extremely talented at one of those things.
Yeah.
Say John Daly, not that's the one everybody thinks about. He could hit the ball so far and everything else. But so you say, well, why isn't he known as like the greatest golf player ever? Well, it's because there's a middle distance game and a short game, and then there's this overarching mental game.
Sure.
Right?
Yep. And everything throws off that mental game. If you're not at your physical best, it nags at you. Somebody like John probably had too many beers over the course of his life. He'll tell you the story. I've heard him interviewed, and he'll talk about he'd be in the bar drinking. Tiger Woods would walk by on the way to the gym after they'd already played a round, and they'd go, "Come on, Tiger, join us for a beer." And Tiger wouldn't join him for a beer until after he'd done his workout. Maybe he'd gone over and practiced his putting. Yeah. John would finish his 18 holes for the day and go sit in the bar.
Yeah, right.
It's like Tiger.
Which is a one way to enjoy golf, I suppose, but not to develop into a champion.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But I have heard it said about you though, that you still have a commitment to actually practice golf as opposed to just go out and play. Play a round of golf. It's sort of like the difference in philosophy between in hockey between the European system and the North American system is the Europeans focus much more on drilling and cones and shooting and passing drills and things like that. Whereas after you get to a certain point, there's some drilling and things like that, but after you get to a certain point in the North American system, United States and Canada, it's just let's play games over and over and over again, right? But I think there's probably something to be said for both. I don't know if it translates directly over into golf, but but it just seems that your success is at least in partially attributable to the fact that you still go out there and work the fundamentals and practice.
Yeah, I usually, first of all, I 5 days a week. If I'm coming out there after work, so I have to be really focused in what I want to do, but I'm trying to accomplish usually something that I've been working on for the last week or month or something, and so I'm trying to groove something into my swing. I got a problem with the putting, so I'm going to work on that. But I have the advantage that I actually like to practice. When I was a kid growing up, the range was very small out there. There was like 3 of us that, usually, could be found on the range most days in the summer, and nobody else hardly practiced. Now more people are practicing out there. The range could be full. It's greatly expanded. It's a nice facility at Headwaters. But, for me, I actually do enjoy it. I get a kick out of practicing. So I'm happy to go down there, spend an hour and a half practicing, and then if If I've got a little extra time, if I play 3 holes or 6 holes, that's probably more than I usually play during the week. And then I'll try to get 18 holes in on the weekend, or maybe 2 rounds in 36. But yeah.
Very interesting style. Who invented golf?
You know what? It's a British, probably a Scottish invention from probably the 1400s. By the late 1400s, the king actually, it got so popular, like in St. Andrews area and stuff, it got so popular that the king actually had to formally decree that you couldn't golf anymore. And he stopped it for a while because he wanted the men in particular to work on their longbow skills, because that was the advantage that the English had, was their longbows. So there were different.
So the King of Scotland had to tell these people, stop playing so much golf and get practicing on your longbow work.
So I don't know if it's the King of England or the King of Scotland,
right.
But Scotland is kind of the home of golf, which is coincidentally where I just came back.
You just came back from there, right? And so you played some of those old Scottish courses and things like that.
Yeah.
How are the Scottish courses different than the ones that are in the United States?
Yeah. So the ones that that are known tend to be on the coast, and those are called links courses. So there's lots of mounds. There's this thick brush that they call, gorse is the worst one, because it's kind of a prickly bush that could grow 8 feet tall, or they could clip it down short, and it's a grass and mounds. And the mounds are everywhere. They're not interested in particularly making their courses pretty or giving you a good place to play your next shot from. And so it's very different. Like some Americans who don't appreciate the history, I don't think would go over there and enjoy it. For me, everywhere I was, I'm thinking about history. And so it was fascinating.
So when you went to some of these places, I mean, most people have heard of St. Andrews and things like that, and you did wind up being able to play at St. Andrews, not the old course, but one of the other courses at St. Andrews. But when you're in there, I'm imagining you go into the clubhouse and there's quite a bit of history there. I was curious, did they have, like when they first invented golf, like I'm talking about the time when these people are playing golf instead of practicing their bow, what do the different clubs look like, and what, how I mean, you think of the modern golf club, and it's such a feat of technology, but thinking back into the days when they didn't have any of that, what in the world did they use as golf clubs?
So it's until recent times, it's been more of a craft building golf clubs, but back then it was hickory shafted golf clubs, cloth or a leather wrap or handle, and then a wood piece on the end to hit the ball with. It looks nothing like what you have now, or it didn't look anything like we had into the past the 20s. And it's all over the place because every set was unique. Some craftsmen put it together. Some of the scores that you hear about them shooting back in the day with those clubs, it's amazing. Some of the courses that I played were pretty much what they were centuries ago. And so it's hard to believe even being able to make contact with the ball. The ball, of course, it could be a feathery, so it's a leather ball stuffed with wet feathers, dries out, expands out, makes the ball have a little bit of compression and rebound. And then they went to a gutta percha, which is basically a solid rubber ball. It's amazing. But yeah, they have a lot of the clubhouses have that displayed. So it's cool. Yeah.
And do they still have this? I mean, that same basic distinction that we have today between woods and irons, or were they all woods, or
Not back in the day, until probably well up into the 1800s. I imagine it was probably almost all wood stuff. And there are guys now who actually take that old stuff out, and play
I was
with
going to
it.
ask that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And not just as a novelty, but there are guys over there in Scotland. I didn't happen to run into any, but I've seen them before on YouTube and stuff. But they actually play. That's how they play every day. Is they take the old stuff out and play with it. And that's it's old guys who are preserving the history.
Sure. So what would you say are some myths about golf?
Well, here's one that it's really been under attack lately. But back when I was in junior high and high school, golf was looked at as a wimpy sport. Mm-hmm. I was probably only saved by the fact that I could play every other sport too. Okay, but it was in these days, starting really with Tiger Woods. He was the first guy I think that really hit the weights hard, and he's the reason that all the guys do. They might not. Some of them.
You're talking about all the professionals now, yeah.
Most of them aren't gonna. They're not trying to bench what Tiger does. I mean, they're not trying to go for 400 pounds or whatever he could bench, but they're lifting to prevent injuries. They're doing. Some of it is a lot of reps. They're trying to develop speed, and of course they develop muscle. The young kids today. Are actually hitting it further than the PGA Tour players are today. You're going to find that when these new Division I players come out of college and make it on the PGA Tour, they're going to be hitting it past everybody else out there. I mean, it's because of the athleticness that they're bringing to the game.
So the myth is that golfers aren't athletes, or that golfers are just sort of these country club fops who, like
rich kids who
dress fancy and there's really no athleticism involved.
A lot of plaid.
Yeah.
No, it has changed, over time, and you're going to see it more and more. Flexibility. I tell you what, it didn't help. Probably matters back in the 50s and 60s when they first started televising these events, and you would see people like Arnold Palmer, Ben Hogan out there. Playing golf and in between shots smoking a cigarette.
Sure, yeah.
So,
well, I mean, it's if they showed that on TV, that's one thing. But I heard stories of guys in the NBA and in the halftime, the whole locker room would be lighting up or lighting a lucky or things like that. But actually, a health teacher once told me when it came to smoking. That you're gonna see some athletes out there who smoke, but just think about how much better they would be if they didn't smoke.
Right, a little better lung capacity.
Yeah,
but with the golfers now, they are recognizing that the better shape you're in, you don't have to go out and run like Tiger did, 6-8 miles a day, but just be in better shape makes you sharper at the end of the round. So if you're as fresh at, the 17th to 18th hole trying to close out a round successfully.
Stamina.
Yeah, you're just going to be more steady. Things won't change for you. It's speed wise and stuff in the swing.
Do you think there's ever been a better golfer than Tiger Woods?
No, I don't think so. I mean, mentally he was strong, and that's oftentimes the difference. And you look at people in the past who are like that. You've got guys like Jack Nicklaus, a tremendous mental game. I mean, intimidating in the same way Tiger is. Hits it a long way, unshakable. Arnold Palmer, probably, if you look at his swing, there's some good parts about it, but it was all just his determination to win, and some other guys in the past. You got guys like Gene Sarazen, who was probably 5'4", who was a tremendous golfer,
like the Jose Altuve of golf.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why is, and you already touched on this a little bit before, but why is golf so hard? Why do people become so frustrated with it? The frustrating ties into the addiction too. But if you're a competitive person and you get out of organized sports, here's a sport where your primary opponent is yourself and your own mind, and so I think
you get so close sometimes. You get part of your game and you're like, oh my gosh, my putting's always been great. Now I'm finally hitting the driver long and straight. And so you're out there hitting your driver long and straight, and then the putting goes. And so it just, I think for so many people, it's the addiction of that they get to, the competition, that they can continue that forward. Many golfers don't start until their 20s or so, when their college careers and some other sport are done. But yeah, it's this idea that you can compete. You can go out and play by yourself. You can go out there at 7 o'clock at night. You're competing with yourself still. But that's the addiction for a lot of people. And you can see improvement, and you can almost grasp it. And then it's not quite there.
I took up trap shooting, and I think there's maybe, obviously golf is a lot more complex than that, but there are times where I've been shooting trap and thinking to myself, I did this perfectly. I lined up the shot. I saw the target. I pulled the trigger at the exact same, correct time. And yet I still missed the target.
Yeah.
And that's frustrating, right? And I imagine that sentiment or that feeling, you probably, if to a person on a golf course, if that's happening and they're saying to themselves, what did I do wrong?
Right. And because golf is it's a game of just a couple degrees. So if my club face is off by 2 degrees at, say, 150 yards, I could very well miss my target by 20 yards left or right. And so stress, trap shooting or golf, these sports that where you've got time to think about things, I think just a little bit of stress throws you off a degree or 2 or 3. Guys will hit shots in a tournament that they've never hit before because of the stress. Mm-hmm. It throws you off your timing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're not relaxed.
So it all comes back to that mental game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us about the year 2019 and sort of your run up and through the amateur tournament that year.
Yeah. So I had almost a year before, probably about 10 months before the actual tournament, which was in late September, I had pulled my Achilles tendon playing basketball. So I wasn't very active that summer, but I got better as I went, but I couldn't hardly walk. I could hardly walk 18 holes, but I could practice. And because I didn't practice a lot, I think everything else was good. My back wasn't bothering me or anything, and I signed up late for that. This would have been the first year of my eligibility, 2019, because I was 55.
Okay.
And so I signed up in July, and I was on the wait list, but I was the first person on the wait list. And so then they called me up a week before the tournament, and they said, "Hey, good news, you got into the tournament." And I was sitting at my desk here in the office, and I thought, I better check my schedule. And I look at it, and I'm like, do I really want to arrange to find a place to stay down there? I got a week, and my calendar happened to be open. So I said, okay, I'll do it. So I went down there with the attitude, like, I'm not sure if I really even want to be here, because I just, and I was worried about.
And where were you going to play?
The tournament was at Stone Ridge in Stillwater.
In Stillwater, right?
Yeah.
That's my hometown.
Yeah. It's a beautiful course. It's top notch, open to the public, but I think it's by the same group that may own Windsong Farms, which is one of the premier private courses. So I was worried about whether I could walk 18 holes for 3 days straight. Well, 4 days if you count my practice round down there. It has
with
some
your
hills.
With your Achilles.
Yeah. But really the Achilles had come together for me probably about 3 weeks before that. And so there were.
I'm just thinking, like in terms of Kirk Cousins, he just tore his Achilles.
Yeah, it's they're talking 4 to 6 months for him, and normally the conventional wisdom is whether you completely rupture or you just tear it, it's always 9 months.
Yeah.
So I don't know what they'll do, stem cell therapy or something but I was able to do it. Every once in a while I get a twinge. For some reason going downhill was the worst, and so I just was careful. I went hills. I would go up sideways, so I was able to walk it. Fine, and putting came together that week, and then for some reason I was relaxed the whole time, and got a little tight on the here and there, but overall I felt pretty comfortable out there. Yeah. And it's a really strong field, and I'm actually fortunate to have come out ahead. So
yeah. So when did you start? I mean, how many rounds do you play for a tournament like that?
So the state championships are all 3 rounds, okay. 3 18-hole rounds.
At what point during your play did it start to dawn on you that I'm doing pretty well here and I actually might have a chance to win this thing?
You know, I held it together the first 18 holes. I shot 2 under the first day, and it gave me a 2-stroke lead. Which was good. You know, you get to the end. I hadn't been playing all that many tournaments. And certainly nothing big I hadn't played for years. And so when I was able to close out by coming in with pars at the end when I needed them, and then have a 2-stroke lead, I figured that maybe I was kind of back, you know. Mm-hmm. I also realized that course was perfect for me. It plays long. It's got a lot of places where you have to hit it not only high but long to carry stuff. The greens are hard to hit if you don't hit the ball high, which I do. And back then, you know, it's been a few years, but in the last 4 years, I've lost some distance, been dealing with some back issues, which I hope I'm getting resolved. But but I was hitting it longer than everybody I played with. Yeah. And so
after that first round, you start to get an inkling that I'm doing pretty well here.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then where were you after the second round?
I was still 2 up. So I shot 1 over my second and third rounds, and I ended up winning by 2, so I was even par. I had a 5 under at one point in the middle of the second round, and then I kind of struggled on the way in a bit. Yeah. And the second day the third day I had a bad start. Yeah. And I blew my lead. I was a 3 up on the guy who eventually finished second. And
who was that?
That is, oh boy.
It's all right.
Dave something or other, but he's actually an excellent player. But I remember I'd never played with him before, and through 12 holes, he'd caught up to me from 3 down. And
did he get in you? Did he try to? I mean, is there any of this sort of like intimidation stuff in golf, and you know where he may have come up to you and made a comment or something of that nature to try to throw you off your game at all?
I have not run into that up in Minnesota. I haven't run into it anywhere. Well, I used to, guys in Arizona would try stuff like that, but you kind of expect that down there. But in college, there were some things that would be done. But anyway, I went over to Dave and I asked him, I said, I'm playing so bad today. I said, where are we sitting? He goes, you and I are tied, and we're 1 ahead of Tom over here, Tom Whaley. And, or maybe you're 2 ahead. But, and then so we had 6 holes left. And I thought, you know, this guy, Dave, doesn't miss anything. He doesn't miss a drive. He doesn't miss an iron. His chips are perfect. He putts well. I mean, he's a very good player. And
so you knew that you had to do what to beat him?
I said, you know, I've got to make birdies to beat this guy because he will not beat himself. And so I birdied 4 of the last 6 holes to, you know, win by 2. Yeah. But yeah, if I hadn't played those last holes under par, I wouldn't have won.
So at what point did you feel like you felt the most pressure?
You know, I think that last round, coming in the third round, and you're playing against guys you don't know, and you start realizing how good they are. I know some of the guys from back in the day because I was down in Arizona for 21 years, but some of these new guys, new to me, I didn't know. Some of them I knew. I'd played against, you know, the Lehmans and, you know, some in the Herzogs and stuff, some of the
big names,
and but some of these other guys I didn't know, and they're tremendous players. So that, like I say, it was the right course for me. Putting came around. So.
And what was going through your mind when you knew that you had you know, made the last shot, or like your opponent had missed his last shot or missed his last opportunity? Yeah. What were you thinking about at that moment?
Yeah. So the 18th hole there can be tough. You've got out of bounds right, sand traps, and then to the left is long grass where if you hit it in there, you're dead. And I hit it in the fairway, and it's a hard green to hit. It's a huge green and lots of slope. And I had an 8-iron in. I still remember it because I hit it right at the pin, and it curved, drew in there about 15 feet left of the hole. So I was only 12, 15 feet, I suppose. And I had a 2-stroke lead, so I just had to 2-putt that. But I hit that shot in there, and there was room over to the right to play safe, but I knew that was not the chip I wanted, so I'm like, I'm just going to go at the hole. And Dave was standing right next to me after he hit his to about probably 16 feet away. And he goes, nothing like playing safe on the last hole with the lead. But I'm like, I just didn't want to chip from the right side, so I didn't want to play it overly safe. So.
But what were you thinking about when you knew you won?
I thought to myself, this has been a long time coming. I mean, that's my first state championship. My high school career wasn't as good as I would have liked. I always played better later in the summer. I think my swing was a little loose. And it was like, this is state championship's been a long time coming.
Yeah. So you probably felt good about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's for me. I'm not going to dance around the green, but I have I get a feeling of some real satisfaction when I win, and just a feeling of comfort, to know that you've done it. Beat 160 other top players in Minnesota.
You can die in peace now.
Yeah, exactly. I've no reason to continue on. I've done it.
So tell it. I mean, I know you're a member at Headwaters Golf Course here in Park Rapids. So just tell us a little bit about the course we have here locally. Some of the strengths and the nice things about it and the features and things like that.
Yeah. So it's a pretty good piece of golf property. It's got some hills. It's built about half of it's built out of an old Norway tree farm. So it's primarily, especially the front nine, it's Norway's. Back nine's got oak, and it used to have a lot of elm trees and stuff, and they're kind of replacing some of that with some other ash and maples. But it was probably built sometime in the 1920s. My dad, who was born in 1919, like I said, caddied out there as a boy. Mm-hmm. It had sand greens. It was 9 holes. The clubhouse was at the opposite end of the course as it is now, and a little tiny green and white clubhouse. I have some vague recollections of that, so I think my dad would bring me out there before I even started swinging the club. They built a new clubhouse late 60s, maybe 69 or so, and then they did the clubhouse and the front nine at the same time was part of the same project. So now we have 18 holes that we regularly use. About probably 20 years ago now, they added 3 other holes. The original intent, and they had diagrams for it, was to make it into a 27-hole course, which back in the late 70s through the 80s into the 90s seemed like we needed that extra 9. If golf keeps roaring back like it is, we will need that extra 9, but I don't think we've got space now because they've built some houses on the edge now. And so, but I think we ideally should have 27 holes. But it's been some transition over time. Our greenskeepers that we've hired over the years have just improved it incrementally over time. We're lucky to have Keith Mueller as the current superintendent. Does a tremendous job, hard worker. And so for northern Minnesota, small town, it's really top notch. I mean, we're always rated one of the better public access courses throughout the state. And it
really is one of the jewels in the crown of Park Rapids, isn't it?
It is. And you have people that are here because they like Headwaters. For people,
and that's a big deal, right? If you're going to retire and you're a golf player, you're a golfer, you're not going to retire in an area that doesn't have a good golf course.
No, you wouldn't tolerate it, know. So we've got good greens to putt on. Everything else is done really well, and like I say, they keep improving it incrementally.
Trent, I want to shift gears here and talk about one of your other passions, which is the art or the sport of snowmobiling.
Sure, yeah.
When did you first get involved in snowmobiling?
Before kindergarten, probably.
Okay. What was your first snowmobile?
Well, I didn't get my first snowmobile until 7th grade. I had a 399 moto ski that my brother had fixed up and sold to me for $120. Before that, though, I had a friend of mine who's also a golfing buddy whose family always snowmobiled. And so first snowmobile I ever drove was his kitty cat, Arctic Cat kitty cat. And I remember we drove that thing into probably 4th, 5th grade. We would drive it all over the place. I would just jump on a kitty cat.
What was snowmobiling like back, in the 70s and I'm thinking we're talking about the era of the 70s here, as opposed to the way it is now. I mean, what was it like?
Yeah. So, well, Park Rapids is fortunate. We have probably one of the most heavily trailed, areas in the whole world. We have so many trails in the Park Rapids area. It's not that other places don't have nice trails, but we have a ton of them. And that's just been expanded over the years. When they first started out, you had the basic trails, and it's taken them decades to develop what we have now. But a lot of snowmobiling was just done wherever you could find a spot. You got way less no trespassing signs. The golf course would go ahead and rope off their greens, and you could go out there and snowmobile and slide all day. And so it was, you could just go anywhere. And now the whole thing is stay on the trails, don't go on people's land.
Private property. And yeah.
I mean, they do some damage, and that's why they don't allow you to snowmobile on the golf course anymore. But it was, the late 60s and early 70s was kind of the Wild West of snowmobiling. They had worldwide, in the early 70s, they had over 300 snowmobile manufacturers.
Yeah. Well, I remember the first day I went snowmobiling, and that was in 2017. I was with you. And I went out on the snowmobile, and I got a quick lesson on side hilling, and I failed that test a couple of times and actually fell off the snowmobile, flipped it over a couple of times and everything like that. I eventually bought a snowmobile, which then I eventually then sold to you. Because, aside from flipping it over and things like that, here I was thinking to myself, this is very dangerous for me. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to do snowmobiling. What kind of a person is attracted to? Maybe I should rephrase that. What kind of a maniac is attracted to snowmobiling?
For a lot of guys, they grew up doing some power sport, and if you want to do it in the winter, the new sleds are stable and comfortable, reliable, and so you get a lot of people that maybe did it as youth and now have started out again, and they're amazed at the quality of the sleds these days. But it's boys and girls that did it in their youth always remember it, and some of them never leave it. Some of them move away, move back, and for me, I moved back here. I would not have moved back to the cold weather from Arizona if it wasn't for snowmobiling, because that gets me out and about, and I found that I enjoyed every bit as much as I did when I was a kid. But yeah, for people who like to ride stuff, it's the easiest thing to pick up. I can put a beginner on there, put somebody out on the lake, and maybe clear a path, or something, a figure eight for them to practice on. They're not going to tip over like a motorcycle. They're not running a clutch. They're very predictable, and except for side hilling apparently. But I think if somebody wants to get out, and maybe I find cross country skiing and snowshoeing too boring. I used to do that stuff when I was a kid, and snowmobiling gives you the thrill.
Those are a little bit safer though.
they are. Although I can outrun bears.
Okay, yeah, true. I could shoot the bear.
Not that there should be bears out in the middle of the winter, but.
One thing though that I noticed about snowmobiling that I thought was really cool when I did it very briefly was that you can get out to some areas in the wintertime where there are no other people. I mean, there's basically you're in these areas where they're only accessible by snowmobile.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't drive a truck out there. You can't drive a four-wheeler out there and everything like that. And I thought that was actually for me that was the coolest thing about snowmobiling was that you're being in an area with the fresh air and just seeing a place in the wintertime. So it looks more like in a pristine type of condition, and I just there's good opportunity for doing stuff like that, and you can make these great runs around here up into the Paul Bunyan and up towards Bemidji. I know you always like to go out to Nadawash and things like that, trailer out there, and then there's the whole culture of stopping and getting something to eat.
The whole social scene of it.
The social scene of it, and
But I've learned to appreciate all of that even more. Growing up here, you just take it for granted. And since I've was away for so long, I moved back in 2011. But I appreciate getting out there. I mean, when I was a kid, it never occurred to me once to take a picture of a snow scene or a picture of my snowmobile. And now I do it all the time. Maybe that means I'm just getting old, but I do appreciate it. And I like to get out there. I live 12 miles out of town again here now, and I do like being out in the woods more than I like being in town.
Right. Right. And these machines, I mean, compared to when you were growing up, I would imagine, but these machines can go pretty fast as well, right?
Sure. I mean, you're dealing with a machine that, most of them are probably under 500 pounds, and it's 125 horse. It's just a standard 600 these days. And so they get up to 90 or 100 really quick these days, but also reliably. I mean, everything out there is so much more long-lasting than the old ones, in my opinion. And it's so much more comfortable to ride. The suspensions over the last, 20 years has been dramatically improved.
Is there a speed limit for snowmobiling?
50.
Is that right?
Yeah. And so everywhere.
And I didn't think that there was a speed limit. But
there is.
Yeah.
And, it's one of those things like if you're talking to law enforcement about their personal rides, you'll get a lot of stories about them, going across the lakes and, at 90 and stuff.
Going 49.5. Oh, no, 90. Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah, but it's so you don't get a lot of enforcement of the 50.
Well,
but
it's not like people are out there with their radar gun. Right?
They can be. They'll
Where would they do that?
So they typically do it at intersections. So where they can pull a car off to the side or block. They'll even block it, and as you're kind of driving around them, they'll check your license to make sure it's currently registered.
So you're riding through the ditch, and they'll check you there, or
on the Heartland Trail seems to be the biggest place.
So where are the speed traps around here?
Well, for us here locally, it seems like County 4 in the Heartland, and then going through Nevis.
Yeah.
You got to be careful when you're going through town. I mean, there's no reason to go 30 miles an hour even through a town, and so you got to obey the local, traffic regulations there, and the snowmobile regulations. So if it's a 20 mile an hour zone in town, you got to go 20, which again, at 20 miles an hour on a snowmobile is fairly quick through a town. I mean, you should, you should probably take it real easy through there, and I always do.
What do you think that the city of Park Rapids or Hubbard County could do to improve the quality of life for snowmobilers?
Yeah, well, if you got snowmobiles in or about your town, you want to make it convenient for them to get to the businesses they would frequent. So that means gassing up, getting a bite to eat, having one beer.
Yes.
And
or no beers.
Yeah. So that's the problem that Park Rapids has is where can you park a snowmobile and then get to a restaurant easily. And we just don't seem to have that here.
Which is amazing because when you think about all the trails that you talked about, we've got this extensive trail system, network, everything else. But we just don't seem to take advantage of it when it comes to providing access to the businesses.
Yeah, well, I've had some thoughts I've put together on this over time. But first of all, Simonson's here locally is close to the trailhead. And it goes, right by our office. That's an easy place to gas up to. But if you think about every other gas station here in Park Rapids, they aren't very convenient. I mean, you find yourself going on sidewalks across too much asphalt and that sort of thing. I know there was some discussion about putting a snowmobile parking lot in this area here in the middle of town so that you could you could go to the Royal a block and a half away.
You park yours, then you get out and walk.
The Good Life, some of these other places. Conversely, some of these places that are further out of town, next to the snowmobile trails, they benefit from the fact that people aren't going to stop in Park Rapids because they can't. Nevis does quite well. Snowmobile trail goes right to the to the restaurants.
Yeah, Nevis is good. Yeah.
One of the things I think that kind of may have foreclosed them from being too snowmobile friendly here, in my opinion, I know some might argue, but is when they got rid of the old train bridge and decided not to replace that with a newer version of some way to get across the Fishhook River there.
Right.
You took off a way to get snowmobiles right into town.
Mm-hmm.
They could have created someplace midtown parking lot wise coming off of that, and because the Heartland Trail used to go all the way through town, and that ended it right there. And so now they come through the old beach and they come to our office here.
Yeah, we see them drive by our office just about every day in the winter.
So that is the trail.
And you actually, this is something that's pretty cool about Park Rapids, living here and having a job in town, is that you can actually commute to work by snowmobile. How many people can actually say they can do that?
Yep. My fantasy is that the snow is 2 feet deep and we got 30-mile-an-hour winds, and the court will not continue a trial, and I got to get there. So I show up on my snowmobile.
With your law book and your...
My suit underneath my
suit,
snowmobiles.
Boy, what a fantasy, Trent. So John D is the website that's sort of like the go-to website for snowmobilers in this area. He's the man who talks about snow predictions, things like that. We're in November of 2023 right now, and what are the experts saying in terms of this winter, what the weather's going to be like? How much snow are we going to see?
Well, okay, so we've got the El Nino weather pattern off the west coast. And what that does is it pushes the weather kind of around us, south of us or north of us, and here in Minnesota, the upper Midwest. So the conventional wisdom with the El Nino is a light snow year and warmer temperatures. So what I'm seeing now is they're predicting slightly below average.
Okay.
So when we had actually La Nina for a number of years out there, which directed snow and colder weather directly at us. And now we've got El Nino this year for the first time in a few years is what I'm reading. And so, it all things being equal, it would be a lesser snowmobiling year. But all you need, it takes 2 huge storms of, 12 to 20 inches, one in January and one in February to keep the snow.
To get that base going.
Yep. And you got enough snow to regroom. And so 2 storms could make the difference between a great year and a horrible year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we've covered golf. We've covered snowmobiling. Now, we don't have enough time to talk about all your practice of law. You've been doing it for a while, we know. How many years have you practiced law?
I think I'm almost at 20. I think I'll be 29 in May.
Okay, so it's been a few years. So what I wanted to do is just go over a few quotes and get your reaction to them. But the first quote that I want to go over, so I've got some quotes from like some English lords and things like that. But the first quote I wanted to go over was one that always stuck in my mind that I learned from you. It's actually, I think it's a quote of you, or it's a quote of somebody that you knew. But it was that when we're talking about not necessarily family court, it could be probate or things like that, but that you had gone to a supervisor early in your career and gone to him and said, I just don't understand this case. I've done everything to put my client in the best position to achieve the goal that I think she wants, which is to come out on top of a property settlement or to have a higher level of custody or more parenting time or whatever the case may be. But my client's just not satisfied with what I'm doing. And then that's when the supervisor told you, and as you told me, that the point of what your client doesn't want you to win the case. Your client just wants you to bloody the other side.
Yeah.
So, what does that mean? And is that true?
Yeah, unfortunately it is. It's kind of the thing that makes family law so difficult and exasperating and stressful. You're oftentimes sticking yourself right into some very personal issues, of two people who are angry and hurt, not thinking clearly, custody and property division and stuff. And so when you're dealing with people like that, what I always try to tell myself is, these are probably very nice people, but their feelings are very hurt. Mm-hmm. And so, the only thing that will correct that need for blood is time.
Yeah.
And so
time and tide.
I've had other attorneys call me up and say, these two are in such a volatile place right now. We got to give them some time. And so we come together for some sort of temporary orders to kind of slow things down. Mm-hmm. One of the ways around that is, oftentimes the divorce is happening because somebody's got another, boyfriend or girlfriend. And so sometimes what solves it really is that the jilted spouse finds a significant other. And now all of a sudden they're a little happier. And now we can get something done. But, so many of these divorces, especially around custody where the parties are tied together at least till the kids are 18 or maybe out of college, it keeps coming full circle. And I keep thinking these poor kids are caught in the middle, having conflict modeled for them. And with their idea that this is just how relationships should be. Mom talks bad about dad, dad talks bad about mom, they scream at each other, they fight over me, cops show up, and so I'd like to say that I've talked people down from those places where they're thinking not clearly like that. Mm-hmm. But that's the ugliest part of family law. But it happens in other areas. But I find that with business disputes, ultimately, you can reason with people on a cost-benefit basis.
It's about money as much as anything else, yeah.
But when it comes to family law, it's too highly emotional. And both parties always think they're right, and the other parties say.
And we as lawyers get caught in the middle, and sometimes we're expected to adopt the persona of the client, and that doesn't work.
Yeah, one of my associates that worked for me, she'd practiced probably about as long as I had, but she came to work for my old firm down in Arizona. And when people would get in that mode where I want you to take on my persona, she's like, this isn't
you're the bulldog.
Yeah. And she said, this isn't a bus and you don't get to get on it and drive. So,
all right. Well, we don't have the time to go into much detail on current practice, but I just thought I'd get your reaction to some of these very interesting quotes that I pulled up. The first two are by Lord Coke. You know who Lord Coke is?
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, and we're not talking about Hunter Biden now. We're talking about the English lord who was one of the premier writers on the common law. And here's what he said. He said, "There be three kinds of unhappy men." I suppose by men he means people. He that hath knowledge and teacheth not. That's number one. Number two, he that teacheth and liveth not thereafter. And number three, he that knoweth not and doth not inquire to understand. That's what Lord Coke said.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself falling into any of those categories, or are you? Because I suppose the inverse of that is that if you are not one of these three, then you are a happy man.
Well, yeah. Well, it's interesting. In light of the what we've seen as political divisions in the U.S. now, you could probably point to all three of those, but the last one in particular, and I think at some
That's
point,
he that knoweth not and doth not inquire to understand.
I think people have come up with beliefs that are so ingrained and so tied to dissatisfaction or anger that they're not willing to listen to anybody else or even look at something from another perspective. And they're not inclined to research, given that they might find something that doesn't back up what they believe. Mm-hmm. It makes it hard.
Mm-hmm. They just want to hear things that confirm their own understandings.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. I think there's quite a bit of wisdom in this, honestly.
Yeah.
But does that make a person unhappy?
I think when you get unbalanced, too far left or too far right, from our perspective as Americans.
Talking but this is as it relates to politics. Yeah. But this is life as well.
Yeah, but I think anybody who's too far one side or the other, there's probably going to be 75% of life that angers them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and I think people who are in that mode are frustrated. And unwilling to flex and unwilling to let things go.
Yeah.
I think people who are
that creates an internal disharmony.
Yeah.
Because I think this quote, it's coming from a jurist, and it really does. I think all three of those really speak to balance, right? I mean, the first one talking about a man who has knowledge and he doesn't teach anybody, right? That can, if you know a lot, you've got a lot to share and to give to the world, basically, right? But you hold that inside, and that can result in your own unhappiness. It's kind of an interesting idea.
Well, especially if you see things in the world that aren't right, that are fixable, and you could fix them, but you just don't participate. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I guess. You may be unhappy, but you're not doing anything about it.
Right. Well, and then the second one talks about that he that teacheth and liveth not thereafter. It's the man who does not practice what he preaches. Yeah. The hypocrite.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I like how he categorizes all three of these as the three, and this is an exclusive definition of the unhappy man.
Yeah.
Right. So if you don't fall into one of these categories, then I suppose you would be the happy man, right?
Right. It would, I suppose he's advocating for some sort of balance.
Yeah. Okay, another one from Lord Coke, which is one I always find that interesting because people always seem to get this wrong, which is, so he said that things are worth what they will fetch at a sale. Okay.
Right.
Yes.
We deal with that all the time. What is the value of things?
Right.
And what's you have people that are in real property disputes, mm-hmm. or in divorce, and you can say what something's worth. You can look it up on the internet and see what it's selling for. But until you actually put something on the market and test it,
you don't know.
You don't know.
You can say it's worth whatever you want to say. When I was a kid, I used to collect baseball cards, and there was a publication called Beckett's. Beckett's was the magazine, and it used to have a price list for mm-hmm. all the baseball cards. So you buy the card, and then you go, oh gee, I wonder how much this is worth. So you turn in the page, and you're like, oh, I just got this, whatever it was, Don Mattingly rookie card. This says it's worth $20. So I got 2 of them. So you go down to the local comic shop or baseball card shop. Okay, here's my Don Mattingly card. I'll take my $20. And you usually get disappointed because there's some problem with it, or that when they buy it, they also need to make a profit on it, and so it's not really worth $20 to you, is it?
And Lord Coke may have been meaning something more deeper than that,
Yeah. But I don't think he was.
Where does
I think Aquinas deals with unrealistic expectations.
Yep.
Okay.
Then what's the value to you may have nothing to do with the value to the majority of people that,
People and the emotions get involved.
Yeah.
And okay. Caleb's telling me we only have 5 minutes left here, so we're gonna have to speed things up. So I'm gonna do one more, but be cognizant of the fact that we might get cut off. Hopefully we won't. Life is made up of a series of judgments on insufficient data, and if we waited to run down all our doubts, it would flow past us. This was said by Judge Learned Hand.
Yes.
Which is one of the great names of all jurists of all times. Yeah.
Learned Hand from the New York Court of Appeals, I believe. Wasn't he?
That was Cardozo, I think. I think Learned Hand was like
Cardozo.
a federal district court judge from like Chicago.
Oh, was
something.
he? Okay.
I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's something like that. So, but just give me a 30-second reaction to that, and then I got one last question for you.
Okay. All right. Do you read the quote again?
Life is made up of a series of judgments on insufficient data, and if we waited to run down all our doubts, it would flow past us.
Well, think about how many times you have a client come to you with what in court might even amount to hearsay, inadmissible evidence, right? And they've done a snap judgment. And then you go to a settlement conference with them and the opposing party, and now they learn there's another perspective.
Yeah.
And they learn there's something else they didn't know about it.
Yeah.
I have actually had people that were ready to kill each other go to a settlement conference and end up hugging at the end because now they're both embarrassed about the misunderstanding and basing their actions on incomplete facts.
Yep.
And it goes to show that two people can even look at the same thing and come up with two reasonable interpretations that are very different.
Akira Kurosawa made a famous movie called Rashomon, which was basically that subject, looking at the same incident from 3 different perspectives and coming up with 3 different narratives. Trent, we are out of time, but before we go, I want to ask, do you have any advice for young people?
For young people? I think I always like kids that appear hungry for knowledge, and I encourage that. I always tell them, be balanced, get your knowledge on different things. I watch kids who bounce from activity to activity. They may not become experts at any particular activity, but they try it all. And so they learn different perspectives on things. But I think just be hungry for knowledge generally, and don't focus in 1 or 2 areas. You might become an expert, but I think our better balanced people are people who try different things.
Trent, it's been a pleasure. You're in the office right across the hall from me, so I see you on a daily basis. But this has been a really interesting conversation, and I hope that you can come back and talk to us again.
All right, anytime.
Thank you, Trent Wilcox.
All right, thanks for having me.
All right.